Okay. So hey everybody. I think we're live now. And again, this weekend I was able to catch Abhimanyu to bring for another session. And welcome Abhimanyu. Very very interesting topic we have. This is based on a lot of people from our community and a lot of people from our alumni network have asked about this topic. Many of them probably budding entrepreneurs. They are thinking what kind of tech stacks are good to be picked up at startup. Many of them engineers also at very very early startups, so they have asked about this topic to be discussed. So today we'll be discussing what uh, goes behind the decision of picking a certain tech stack at a startup. Who decides, why do they decide so, and we will pick something from Abhimanyu's experience, something from my experience as well, and then we will take some, very famous examples also from the industry. I think I'll start off with some of one. Obviously, the important introductory question itself, which everybody asks is. Uh, in your experience, you have been at early stage startup also many times. You have started your company also more than once. So, what was the process behind picking up a tech stack? Which tech stack did you pick up, and why did you do so?
Right. Uh, so, of course, it's very, very hard to say what is, right or wrong. But of course, I can talk about my experiences and what worked versus what didn't work, right? Uh, Starting from my early journey, back in the college days, also we tried building few startups. But of course, those were I shouldn't call them startups, but more of Dexter's laboratory, right? As the first year, second year college kid, whichever. Like often, I will be very candid that when I was a second year kid, I would just whatever is the latest technology launched in the market, I would just want to play with it and build something out of it. And it's a reverse that today, as a of course, a long way to go, but been working in startups for 10, 12 years. Today, my thought process is more of that: what is the problem to be solved, and what could be the best solution for it, even if it is, let's say, a 25-year-old technology or maybe the latest technology, whatever it might be. But I start with the problem and then try to figure out the solutions, right? Often back in the college days, the thought process was more of कि यार अभी एंड्रॉइड लॉन्च हुआ है, बहुत कूल लग रहा है, तो अब एंड्रॉइड पे व्हाट राइट.
Right.
Both are good, of course. Like that helped me. That process helped me learn a lot of interesting tech stacks because of deep curiosity. But in the hindsight now, what I see is that particularly when you are building a startup, which is serious business, you are not just having fun as a second year college kid. Then I think it's important that you start with the problem. You have that intellectual honesty that what is the problem that you are trying to solve. You are not married to that. I love Node.js or I love Ruby on Rails or I love Java, so I'm going to build it in this. But you should, and of course there is no silver bullet in the world. Okay, looks like did we lose Arnav? Okay. But yeah, I hopefully Arnav will join back in a short while. Until then, as I
No,
was
no, no.
saying, okay,
Yes. I'm here only. Right. Go on.
yeah. So I was saying that there is no one fact is that there is no silver bullet. Anyone who says that, let's say, MERN stack is better than Java stack, or anyone saying that Java is better than MERN, like know that this is a futile debate. It has no meaning. There is no answer to it. A more precise question might be that this is my problem, this is the things that I'm trying to solve for, these are my prerequisites, and which is the tech stack which fits best for this. And even as an answer to that, there might be multiple tech stacks which are which all work, right? And that is the layer at which one may decide that fine, say MERN stack also works well for this, Java also works well for this, but I have a lot of expertise on MERN stack. I will be able to very quickly build on it. I know things in depth, so I will be able to build it better. So I'm making this choice because otherwise I will have to learn a new stack, which will take away some time, maybe a month or so, and I might not be able to move that fast, right? So the first level should be that what is the right for the solving the problem. Then the second layer could be what you already know, because that will save you some time.
Right. So that's of course interesting perspective, and I think my personal experience has been very similar. Like you were saying, in my college days, I also initially tried to build cool things. When we started with, for example, coding blogs, actually, tech stack decision came much later. We started in an offline classroom. We were teaching people like a pathshala kind of a thing, and then we thought, okay, we need some online platform. So by that time, I think that intellectual honesty had come into place. That this is
Yeah,
the problem we are solving. And
yeah,
in my case, I had also picked up Node.js, for example, and it was a combination of both. Something I was very familiar with. I knew that we can build it quickly in that. Second thing, I realized that okay, it's fairly popular enough that if we build something, we will get the required libraries and all would be possible. And a lot of people were already building. Like I did some Google search and all. Okay, fine, good enough, big enough company, $1 million company. They are doing Node.js. If
right,
उनका चल जा रहा है तो हमारा कुछ तो चल ही जाएगा हम तो स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं so I was like ठीक है that assurance is there that it will work and based on that picked up that decision uh,
right.
so
Actually,
actually
I will.
following up yeah.
Yeah, I will maybe add just one more thing, with an example that, taking example of interview bit, I do believe that many of our audience might have used interview bit already. So interview bit, for
Right,
example, is built on Ruby on Rails, right? The backend is on Ruby on Rails, front end is on, we use various UI frameworks like Bootstrap and React, etc. Right? Now, the reason to pick, very candidly, the simple reason to pick Ruby on Rails was that. Of course, we figured that we will be able to build very quickly on it. And in my previous
right,
job at Fab, the tech stack there was also Ruby on Rails. So I was in the flow with Ruby on Rails, right? That I was able to build a lot of basic systems, build a lot of basic code within few weeks, right? Versus, let's say, if
right,
I had chosen, let's say, tech stack like, say, Scala or Golang, maybe on some of the parameters it might have been better, but since we started working on interview bit, we were able to launch in 3 to 4 months, right? But if I had picked for whatever reason that Scala is new age, then probably the launch would have pushed instead of 3 months to 6 or 9 months, right? And then in that
right.
3 to 6 months that we saved, we were able to generate a lot of traction. So for any startup, speed is, I think, one of the most important stuff. That how quickly can you build and roll out? Because it's not like e-commerce that you are building another e-commerce, everything is known. You are doing a lot of experimentations. You want to be very fast. At Facebook, there
Yes.
used to be this quote that move fast and break things. It's okay even if some of the things break, but super important
Mm.
for a startup is how fast can you move, right? So building something that already definitely gives you wings. You can execute things much faster.
Right. Actually, by the way, if people who are watching the video, if you have any, follow-up questions, definitely submit them on the chat. We would love to pick those questions up. While I do have an initial set of questions that we got from the community, but in addition to that, any questions that come on the comments, I would love to pick them up. So one question which is a little, drill down on the earlier part, and then we got this question from people is that. What is generally the process like? Do the co-founders discuss about what tech stack to be picked up? Do you think about founding team, juniors in college who know that tech stack, that people you will add to your team, those kind of things, like your personal experience, also your friends and all who have started startup? What is the process? How do people get, or is it like you just start building in one tech stack, let's see if it works or not? How's the journey usually?
Right. I have seen different people following different processes, and I will start with the simplest, which you also mentioned, Arnav, that we know this tech stack, we know this is what we need to build. Let's start building, and we'll figure out as we go, right? And
Right.
to be very candid, while this might be the simplest approach, but trust me, it has worked wonders for many. Uh,
Hmm.
because like let's take few examples. Facebook was built in PHP, right? Uh,
Right.
the only reason was because probably that was the only language Mark Zuckerberg knew when he started building Facebook, right?
Right.
I think and there are quite such a few examples, right? Because so this is the simplest process, of course, and trust me, it works more than not. The other process, of course, a little more thought out process might also be that you do try to map a little bit. So, for example, I may take few examples, a bit more with some more technical depth. And here I'm assuming that, of course, all our audience are techies, so that shouldn't be an issue. That let's say if I were to build, and actually another factor is that any large scale system, trust me, it will not be on one single tech stack. For example, let's say if we talk about Amazon.in website, right? In the background, there might be, different tech stacks doing different things. Of course, with microservices architecture, every system might be running on different stuff, right? But let's say if I were to build a chatbot, right? Or let's say if I were to build let's say even if I was back in 2008, let's say instead of the folks who started WhatsApp, I was starting WhatsApp, right? Then it would have made a lot more sense to build, something like WhatsApp on a, interruption-driven, IO-driven platform, let's say like Node.js. Versus, let's say, building on top of Java 1.6 that was available back then, which didn't have interrupt-driven, IO mechanism in it. The reason being, if I'm building a, real-time messaging application, and where I expect a lot of users to be online at the same time, and in real time I have to send them updated messages. My only way to do that with a non-interrupt driven system would be that I have to keep a live thread open for each user who is using the service, which is going to hit my scalability very, very badly. It's going to be very hard to scale on such a platform, right? So then Node.js is going to be much better choice because I do not need to keep live connections. I can just keep a pool of connections, and basis the interrupt, I can push data in real time to every client which is connected, right? There was I'm forgetting the precise term, but back then in terms of scalability, there was an interesting challenge, I think, called N10K, which meant that can you manage 10,000 live connected users at the same time using just one node, using just one server, right? That let's say if you need to support 100,000 live users, let's say on WhatsApp at a time, if there are 100,000 live users, how many servers you need, and can you achieve that with just 10 servers, right? So Node.js was able to kind of perform on that Node.js can do that. But then there are a lot of things that Node.js cannot do. So for example, if I was building, say, Instagram, right? And then one very key feature of Instagram is that an image will be uploaded. And let's say we were to implement it in this way that the image transformation, the filters that we apply, that image transformation has to be done on servers, right? Then Node.js is not the best choice. You just need a very lightweight, probably a C++ server will serve better here, where you have a very lightweight backend process. It's not a live update, but it's a batch job. A job comes, and it's okay if it takes 5-10 seconds, but it can be asynchronous, and it can process the image and return back. So I think thinking in that way is also important. That what is at a technical level, what is the task at hand, and what is the framework which gives you capabilities for that. And of course, it might help that if you have people in your friend circle or your colleagues who you can discuss it with, who might have deeper expertise, checking with them that would making something like this, would it be easy in this framework or this framework, that definitely helps. As an example, I can give another example from interview here, from the journey actually, that those of you who have if you are building essentially any online judge, right? So in the backend, of course, it's obvious that there are going to be so many test cases that you wouldn't want to keep a thread open for that. Let's say, like for example, at interview bit, we had conducted a online test for coordination, which was taken by 100,000 people at the same time. So imagine 100,000 people taking a test, submitting their code at the same time, and you need to build a system which still works, without any hiccup, right? Now, whenever someone submits their solution is going to run on, let's say 10-20 large test cases to see whether their solution is correct or not, right? Now, this cannot be an online process because this might very well take 10, 20, 40 seconds. And if you keep threads open for 40 seconds for each user, then definitely your servers are going to go down, or you will have to add 20,000 servers in the background, right? Both are, of course, not possible. So how we implemented it was that user submits the code, and it will be a background process. The request of the user on submission will be closed immediately, and a background job will run this submission on all the test cases and see when it fails. Another challenge here, however, is that when the submission is running, of course, on each server, there might be thousands of users who are submitting their code, right? They might very well also use global variables. They might corrupt the public state of the machine, and which might impact the code of someone else, right? You never want that you submitted a code and my code is not running because of some global variable that you have.
Correct.
So to address that, what we did was that in real time, we will spawn a new Docker instance. Like the thought started was that we should create a virtual instance, create a sandbox inside it, and only
Right.
run this user code in this sandbox. And as soon as this user's code has been run, then click kill this entire thing, make it a clean slate, and then start again, right? Now then we figured out that which tech stack might help us with that. Probably Java, C++, Ruby. They do not offer anything like this out of the box in the framework. Like
Right.
Ruby on Rails, for example, as a framework, doesn't offer anything like this, right? Then we got there is something like Docker, right? That Docker is a framework which can potentially offer this to us. Of course, there are
Right.
other virtualization frameworks as well. VMware had one, Docker is one. There are a few others. Hypervisor was another open source one, right? So we
Right.
evaluated them all. For us, another parameter was that spawn time should be very quick, right? If let's say if a
Mm.
virtual machine takes 30 seconds to just spawn, that would mean that after you submit your code, you will have to wait for additional 30 seconds, right? And then we noticed that Docker's spawn time is much less if it is a very minimal image, right? So basis these
Right.
all parameters, that okay, let's use Docker for this problem, right? So I think this is very similar to solving an algorithmic problem. It is more of an algorithmic problem that what are your cases, what are the boundary conditions that you have for building whatever you are building, and then like just like a DSA problem, you will define that what is the best choice of data structure and algorithm for to solve this problem. Similarly, you will decide that what is the best choice of framework or platform to solve the problem that you are trying to solve.
Right, 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 right. I think that puts a lot of it into perspective. That's correct. At Coding Blocks for creating the judge, we also use Docker because I think the best possible
Pretty
choice as
obvious,
you
right?
defined is pretty obvious, exactly.
Correct, correct.
For us also, the rest of the backend and all was
Right.
yeah, we had a Node.js and all we were using, which was okay for rest of the backend, but for this
Right.
particular solution, having a shell script plus Docker, very lightweight solution that can be spawned quickly, that's what at the end of the day was needed for us,
Correct.
right?
And
We
it's
got
pretty
a
interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
pretty interesting that despite being two different teams, of course, two very different, very smart teams, they reached to the
right,
same conclusion, same solution, because we followed the same process, right? That here are the input
right, right.
parameters we need, and so yeah, that is the right way.
Correct, correct, correct. We have an interesting question that has come up from Rohit, which is basically, do you have an advice for building any e-learning platform? What kind of tech stack should be picked up in today's time?
Right, right, right. Pretty interesting, Rohit. And again, probably EdTech cannot define which tech stack or which platform you use, right? Because EdTech is more of, for example, it's similar to asking that if I want to build an e-commerce website, and how do I define e-commerce website? An online website which sells stuff, right? But
Right,
now there can be a lot of very different flavors of it, right? You might be building a social commerce platform, which is still a e-commerce platform, where let's say everyone in your friend circle in real time, you see a feed what they're buying, and then that maybe gives you more. Or there might be an e-commerce platform built very heavily on a recommendation engine, right? Which will be probably
mm-hmm.
powered by a lot of data and some advanced machine learning algorithms, etc. Now, basis what you
Right,
really want to do within e-commerce, your choice of platform and tech stack will hugely change, right? Similarly, let's say
right,
in edtech, exactly, edtech is the problem, right? Edtech is more of that, how are you going to make a better learning experience for everyone out there?
mm,
Now, there might be various questions. Are you building it for young kids? Are you building it for K-12? Are you building it for higher education? Is it more vocational, or is it more, for hobbies, right? It could be anything. And then exactly what features do you have in mind that
right,
you think that if built, it will, going to serve your users in really good ways. And basis that you will have to define. So some pointers that if you are planning to build features which will have a lot of liveliness in it and not a lot of background processing, right? Then the Node.js kind of platforms might serve you better. On the other hand,
mm,
however, if you are building platforms which are going to have very heavy heavy lifting on the back end, but it's not a lot of IO, right? It's not a lot of liveliness in the interactions. Then probably, stuff like Java or C++, etc., might serve as a better choice. And apart from any of these, I think another really important factor is, like assuming that of course I am fairly confident, I do wish you luck that you end up making your tech company a really high growth one. But as your team expands, will you be able to easily hire people for that, right? Now let's say if you pick a very niche technology, very latest technology, which might fit best, but then after 6 months you want to hire 5 engineers, and engineers with this skill set are just not available in the market, right? So, that's gonna put you in a very bad state that you are just not able to hire for your team. Versus, let's say, if you build it in one of the popular technologies, let's say, be it Java, be it Node.js, be it Ruby on Rails, then naturally you will be able to hire really smart people much easier, with lot less effort. So that is also one important. What is the kind of community? Let's say when you are trying to build something, if you get stuck in something, will you be able to easily, find resources online? Will you be able to take, do you know a lot of people who know this stuff who can help you with this? These are also become very, very important.
Right. Actually, there is a more in detail question that we had from our community. Actually, in this direction only, like you were saying, ease of hiring and community size and all. So,
Yeah.
if you have to sort of map these factors, like this on the screen is static versus dynamically typed. What kind of language should we pick? What is the speed of execution? What is the size of the project? What is
Yeah.
the sort of RAM usage and all that the project performance basically of the project? Then whether it's a compiled language or whether it's interpreted language. Then a lot of factors people say these days: does that is it open source? Does it have a lot of GitHub stars? Does it have a big Stack Overflow community? So these factors, where do which one come in your experience? Which are more important to keep in mind, and how much they impact your decision over the long term?
Right. Uh, so Arnav, of course, would love to hear even your thoughts on quite a few points. But how I see is that each of these points, for example, community, like GitHub, popularity on the communities like GitHub, Stack Overflow, project size, speed of execution. These are kind of different variables. These are five, six, seven, eight different variables, and each might have different rating. We might be able to give different rating on different variables.
Right.
And on, like, now probably the similar, like, each of these variables might be more or less relevant for the particular project that I'm building, right? uh,
Right.
and based on that, I think you will have to make a choice. I might, for example, the one default thought that come to mind is that we should definitely give more preference to platform which are more popular already, right? Which has a
Hmm.
lot of Stack Overflow questions, which have a lot of GitHub stars. But the world is about duality. There is no, just right answer or wrong answer, right? Um,
Right.
However, for example, let's say, now this is an interesting part, that back in 2011, I worked on a very interesting project, which was being used for, CERN laboratory. CERN is the folks who build Large Hadron Collider,
Large Hadron
right?
Collider. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you are working on something very, very niche, right? Let's say it might be, let's say, something like algorithmic trading, right? That you are building a very niche, pure C code, which is going to be used for algorithmic trading, where even milliseconds of difference is going to lead to profits or losses of millions or billions of dollars. Uh,
Right.
then probably you don't care about that, how many GitHub star it has, because then it's a closed small piece of code, which
Right.
has to have highest performance, right?
Hmm.
And then you are only going to focus on what is the speed of execution, what is the very high accuracy, etc. Right? Give me just one moment. There is something that I need to get.
Okay. I'll while that happens, I think I will pick up one question that came up, which was on I think from somebody to me it seemed. So you have to create a Tinder clone, but instead of pictures, it has videos and audios for swipes. What kind of tech stack would you choose? So yeah, I was just answering a question that had come. I think somebody had pointed towards me,
Yeah.
and I think here very important here is we have probably not discussed actually till now is that the tech stack choice on backend and front end might be dictated by different variables as well. That's also very important. And for example, when you talk about something like Tinder, then it's as much important as it is what backend tech stack you would be choosing. Along with that, it's also important what front end tech stack also you are choosing because very fast the user is swiping through. So the ability to quickly sort of decode that video on the fly and play it on the device and very quickly sort of in a low latency way download also those videos because even with photos there is a challenge when you have somebody swiping through say Tinder very fast. You have to keep on filling up the buffer of the next few photos very fast. So here you have, for example, again, my experience I've seen is that wherever you have need of low latency, high speed decoding of videos, etc., you might find out that no, you might be well versed with say React Native or with Flutter, and you might be easier to hire a little bit, younger, junior, cheaper developers, and start with that app. But wherever you need high performance native level encoding, decoding, these kind of support, and you might find a lot of case studies also, a lot of apps which have sort of scaled and they have hit this roadblock. They have to go native, because then you get access to the lower layers of your probably GPU itself as a pipeline for faster decoding of the video. Now
Yeah.
that case, I mean, when I say native, I'm not even saying something like Swift or Kotlin. Many apps have to write a bit of C++ code also at the client level itself. Now those choices also you have to make. And in addition to that, I might add that there are a lot of apps. An example I would give you is recently they published a blog, Shopify. So Shopify finds that using React Native only for UI, and they share it common across iOS and Android. They use React Native for UI, and along with that, they use something called Kotlin multi-platform native, in which like they write code in Kotlin, which gets compiled to native binaries, not to JVM code. It compiles to native binary, just like C++ code. That they use for running the business logic so that it's faster. So there's kind of very asymmetric kind of thing. They are using two different cross-platform frameworks, one for handling UI, one for handling fast performance for the lower layers of the app. So those kind of choices might also needed to be made, because whenever you are again working on a niche use case, fast moving videos, photos, etc., you will have to pick some choices along that. Anything to add? I think we've been new to that.
No, no, no. You covered it in quite some details, and of course, front end. Actually, this is my personal opinion, and of course, opinion are always subject for debate. But since quite some time, quite a few people have tried, getting a unified framework that where back end and front end are all built on the like for example. Marn guys tried it for quite some time that we will build the
Right.
backend code in also in JavaScript, front end code is, and we'll try to
Yeah.
reuse the pieces there, right? My personal
Right. Right.
opinion, as a if I may consider myself as a tech architect role, if I put myself in a shoes of a tech architect, I would say don't even try to do that. Backend and front end are two independent things. Build your backend as you would want to, build your front end as you would want to. Let them communicate through well-defined APIs, be it a JSON API or whatever it might be. But in my experience, trying to kind of reuse pieces of front end in the back end in the front end, doesn't really lead to a very clean architecture. And it's generally very, very hard as well, because the kind of problems that you will have to solve on the back end and front end, they are like different problems in itself. So, the
Right.
trying to kind of, retrofit generally do not lead to very clean solutions.
Right, right, right. In fact, when we teach about say high level design, I think one of the important parts there is also creating boundaries within your systems, which is
Yes.
at a more fundamental computer science theory level. It's a very important knowledge to have, that how can you create perfect boundaries where you know that okay, this is my backend, this is my front end. Again, within the backend, this is my say API aggregation layer, this is my compute layer, and
Okay.
then you create things like APIs or a RPC interface or whatever interface you use. There are multiple interfaces also available today, but
Right.
you create a boundary, you create an interface, and then you take ownership of one particular piece and you choose the correct tech stack for that, which is very important. And a lot of
Right.
times people lacking a little bit in a broader HLD understanding, they try to go for something universal which fits into a simpler understanding. Okay, the same code I write is gonna work everywhere, but in
Yeah.
reality, that's not what is happening.
Yeah.
These universal frameworks are abstractions over proper boundaries. Whenever you're using
Right.
the same piece of code that is executing on both front end and back end, probably internally some RPC call is happening. If you don't understand that, then you create a khichdi out of your code.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. For
Which
both
definitely
system design, I think to design a very well-designed system, it is very, very important that you are able to abstract things out, uh, and then focus on solving that problem. I think the service-oriented architecture that Amazon has popularized, and Jeff Bezos actually, I think in some of his speeches, he has also mentioned that this service-oriented approach he doesn't only apply to software systems but to business as well, right?
right,
That
right,
like let one unit do its thing, and let them figure out how they want to do it. Don't be bothered about how they do it, right? And just define
Right.
interfaces how these two units are going to interact with each other, not just technical, but let's say even business units, right? So I think that generally
Right.
leads to much smoother, execution and cleaner, execution.
Right, 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 right. So now, progressing to another question is obviously very. I really loved that question, and this also again come up from some of our, alumni network itself. Was that this concern that people have that we picked up something when you're starting the startup. How much does it affect the long term? Let's say tomorrow something happens, we have to change the tech stack. What kind of events might need to change the tech stack for the
Right.
first place? And then if such an event happens, then does it become life and death? How does a startup survive? So any light you can shed on this?
Surely. It happens all the time. Trust me that every single startup which is going to succeed, they are going to see this. On the other hand, uh, like this event will be seen by every startup, if they do not die, of course, sooner or later.
Right,
However, I like, of course, I might be, I cannot talk about universally, but in my experience, I have never heard of a startup which died because they picked the wrong tech stack. That has never happened, right? There must be
right,
some other issue. But if a startup has a solid business and it has a good tech team, a good technology culture in the team, uh, then any good strong technology team, they can always survive whatever tech stack changes they might need to do over their journey, right? And of course, any startup is just like, let's say, one of us humans, that we get born as a
right,
baby and then we grow to be a teenager and then we become a young man and then we become a middle-aged man and then we become an old man and then potentially one day die, unless health
right,
sciences increases at a rapid pace. Every startup also go through similar journey, right? And just like, let's say, the
right,
kind of food you will have as a kid versus as an adult is different. Probably it is the right thing that when a startup is an infant, then some different kind of tech stacks might make more sense for it. But when it becomes
right,
adult, then probably there might be different kind of food that the company would need, right? Some
right,
examples I may take here. And often there's also very funny things that what happens when, let's say, you start with the wrong technology, but you
right,
become a really powerful company. You become one of the world's most powerful company. Then what happens, right? And then funny thing is
right.
that there have been instances where these companies become so powerful that if their tech stack had an issue, they went back and fixed the tech stack instead of having to change the tech stack.
Right, 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 right,
One example I can give here is of Facebook. So Facebook, for example, was built in PHP, right? As I mentioned that because that probably was the only language that Mark Zuckerberg knew when he was building, right? So he didn't fall in this trap that I will learn the coolest new language and then build it. He said this is what I need to build, and I know PHP. I can build it using PHP, so I will just go ahead and build it. Within few years, of course, it exploded, became one of the hottest companies in the world, and then within few years it became top 10 biggest companies in the world within finite resources, right? So what
right,
Facebook did is they hired the PHP's creator because they saw
right,
that PHP is running slow. Like there was a proposal that on the back end it is running slow, it is getting harder to scale.
right,
We are having to throw too many resources, and there are, let's say, memory leaks, etc., etc., at this scale. So, and what they realized was that it would be probably more expensive to rewrite this all in some other language. They said that why should we just go and not make a better interpreter for PHP, which can kind of take care of all the issues that it has, right? So
right.
actually, Facebook improved PHP itself, right?
Correct.
Another, like, even, and often then organizations often might even become so powerful that when these guys were building their UI frameworks, React got
Yeah.
created in the same way that React got created at Facebook, that they noticed that on the UI framework, if they are able to build the components in a reactive way, where like instead of having a lot of DOM elements on the page, there can be a virtual DOM, and then virtual DOM gets rendered on
Right.
demand. Then much bigger UIs could be much more responsive, much more reactive, right? So they didn't find any existing framework for that, so they just went ahead and built it, right? So no company will ever die because of because you chose a wrong framework. However, a lot of startups do die because rather than focusing on what needs to be built, often as techies we all love debating on which framework is best, the cleanest. And if we end up spending a lot of time on that rather than building what the user need, that definitely
Right.
might lead to a death of the company. Hard or
Right.
easy? Sometimes it will be easy, sometimes it will be hard. Often, it's I wouldn't undermine the effort that goes on to kind of either switch the tech stack or do anything like that. But it might be easy or hard, but it will be always doable if your company is doing well.
Right. I think in the similar lines, I have personally seen what say Facebook has done to PHP. Similar thing I've seen the Android team at Google do the same thing to Linux kernel, because
Yeah.
the Linux kernel was designed for very desktop oriented, high power server oriented use case. Because
Right.
before Android came, the primary place where Linux was used is in servers. So they used to design it for a use case where always there is high power available. You have to keep RAM more free. And then when Linux got used in Android, there the needs completely changed. Now you're running on battery. Power saving is important. And then the RAM, how it works in a mobile device, you can use as much of the RAM. You can probably use 95% of the RAM. That's also fine, because then swapping takes place, and the swap is also on a very fast device, because on a mobile you are not running on hard disks, you're running on flash storage. So that in mind, you have to rewrite the kernel in a very different way. So for a long time, for I think 3-4 years, there were two branches of the Linux kernel. One which was more mobile oriented, which Android team was using, and one which a desktop, the Linus Torvalds group, they were using. And then there was a big effort where they merged all of it together. And as a result of that, today you see very good Linux desktop
Right.
distributions which are running on ARM-based PCs, which would not have
Right.
happened without Google's help. And they invested quite a few millions of dollars. They paid for their team to
Right.
take time out of their work and contribute back to Linux so that this can happen.
Right.
And that can happen. Like, when Android was created, Andy Rubin in the early days, they could not come up with a new kernel. They wanted to create a nice UI, but they could not rewrite a new kernel. So they used Linux. Now, and from there, actually, I should come to a question. This very, very nice question from Vaibhav. It has come. So it's basically when deciding between choosing an open source technology versus something that is provided as a service, like a SaaS kind of a thing. How do we choose, and could it happen the open source tech leads to roadblock which cannot be resolved in time? So I think pros and cons on both. And I think, by the way, Varis had also asked the same question. So just picking the question by
No,
Vaibhav,
no,
which was
actually, I'm seeing really a good question. So really glad about how insightful questions the audience are posting. And actually, this is actually like as we grow, in tech, where like we get at a position where we have to make choices, and whichever organization we are with, our organizations are going to live with these choices for a very long time, right?
right.
And over time, of course, there are a lot of variables to make such decisions. So again, I might be saying this again and again, but there is no silver bullet or like just this versus that answers to this. But we can talk about some frameworks that like which might help find everyone their own answers depending
Right.
on the context, right? So the first thing that I have learned in my career, of course, I did make a lot of choices which, in the hindsight, were not the best choices, and of course, made few which were better choices as well.
Right.
But overall, my experience have been that it is if you are if you are part of a a well-running business where there is no issue of resources, capital, etc.,
Right.
or at least so it is always better to buy rather than building, right? Because someone
Right.
who is, let's say, building it, and the person's full-time job is to build the platform, provide it to you, then it's very natural that they will be able to maintain it much better, because we will have 100 things to take care of our own business, right? So it is
Right.
always
Right.
better to buy rather than building. So building should be only on your core. Whatever business you
Mm.
are building, whatever things are very, very unique to your business, that is what you should focus on building. Everything else you should try to either use open source or take it as a service. But do not ever think of trying to build from scratch. Often, as a young techie, when I had maybe a year or two of experience, I was always super excited about building, right? That
Right.
there might be one big fancy framework, but I would say that I will build it, bada maza aayega. But
Mm.
on a bigger picture, that is always the wrong choice, right? Uh, Now comparing between open source versus using it as a service, again my depends, right? The
Right.
pros of using it as a service, that you do not need to worry about it. You can just rely on the provider, and of course you would want to make sure that the provider you are using is reliable, right? Or you know certain SLAs, that the service is not going to go down when you really need it, all right?
Right.
And it frees a lot of your bandwidth, right? Because then again you can use that time. Otherwise probably you will set up this open source server or project on your own. You will have to make sure that it is, there's enough uptime, upgrades whenever a new version is coming. You will have to spend time on any of these, right? But on the other hand, if you are in a situation where you wanted to do a lot of customizations to the service, like like, let me take one example, that there is Slack, right? Slack is available as a service. Let's say if I want to run a community, or let's say even for your own company, your one option could be that you can just pay Slack for each user that from your company that uses it, and you can use it. Another option could be that there are open source alternatives of Slack available, for example Mattermost or others, and you can use that, host it on your servers. Still you will have to spend money, because you will have to spend on the servers, etc. Now if there are a lot of customizations that you want to make in this communication platform, right? Or if there are a lot
Right.
of unique configurations that probably Slack is not willing to give you, and of course it's a large company, it's not going to build the software as you want, then
Right.
you might opt for building it yourself, right? However, if
Right.
you know that the services are all same, what you are going to run is just same as Slack, and if your company has budgets, of course, then it is always better to use it as a service, right? Because Slack
Right.
probably will never go down. But if you run Mattermost on your own servers, there might be a time when there is a memory leak, or something went wrong and then the service went down, and then you will have to fix it, which time you can use to make better things. So in that scenario, if you do not want to build anything custom, then it is always better to go with the hosted solutions.
Right. That's very interesting. We have got some more also questions, and one question. So, Rachit has asked about API integration. Should we use some tool like MuleSoft, Amazon API Gateway? And
Yeah.
I think before going to Abhimanyu, I would actually preface this with saying one little learning. Personally, I have burnt my fingers on. By the way, just disclaimer: I haven't exactly myself used either Amazon API Gateway or MuleSoft, but more general answer, and I face this problem when using Firebase as a backend for some mobile apps, is that uh, be cautious when you're using proprietary solutions, which you can't extract out later on when you want to scale or want to leave that particular system.
Right.
This problem, and I burnt my own fingers at my own side project once and my startup once. When I went to Zomato, I saw that we were burning the same fingers there. The Zomato's chat was built on Firebase, and there was a time when we scaled from 50 cities to 500 cities. So we went very big. And when we were doing that, we hit some boundaries on Firebase. Like more than 30,000 people can't be online on a single Firebase node. That's a
Oh,
technical
understood.
limitation from Google's end, right? And at that point, what happens is, like, as a CEO, Tinder comes and he says, we don't have time to rewrite this right now. I can't, tell you as an engineering team to go and recreate Firebase. I know you won't be able to do it. And he has been running a company for 10 years. He knows engineers will raise their hand and say that, we can do it. Give us 2 months, we will do it. And then it will turn into 2 years and it will never get built, because Firebase has been built by 5-6 years by a team like Google,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So it does not happen like that. So he said that, okay, figure out how we can scale Firebase. And that time we came up with hacks, like we used 30 Firebase accounts, different Firebase accounts, and we wrote a hacky load balancer on top of it, which basically connects user agent from the client side, a user agent from the customer service side, and they make sure that both of them are connected to the same node. And by chance, if they're not connected to the same node, it goes round robin through all 30, and finally it finds one that's connected. I mean, these kind of hacks are, today we look at the system, we will say what a monster it is. But if you understand the context why it is at this position, it's because, we painted into a corner where we can't rewrite it from scratch on our own system at that speed that the company is growing. So we have to
Uh,
hack it for Firebase to be used. And the biggest
right.
problem at that point I felt was, if you were using, say, something like a lot of PubSub frameworks are there also, which are basically third party, these open source libraries which you can run on your own server. in those cases, what happens is you can, if you're using that service, the service does not scale for you. You can use their core open source engine and put it on your own AWS and scale it yourself. But with Firebase, you can do, because Firebase's backend is proprietary. You don't know what logic they are running. You can't sort of replicate that on your own. So that is something to be cautious about, and whether these glues like Amazon API Gateway, what exactly is it achieving? Are you able to understand that? If you're not able to understand, if you use a black box that you don't understand, tomorrow migrating would be a problem if you have that. And I think giving over to Abhimanyu, anything additional to that if you would like to add to this answer?
Right. And actually, I may share this, interesting thing, a fact from the other side, that every PaaS company, be it Google Firebase, AWS, Azure, they generally design the solutions in a way that it is hard for you to move out of them. So it's a kind of fight, but at the same time, I would say that again, it's hard to say that you should use or shouldn't use. But in the early days of startup, the best thing is just to build whatever you can build fastest, which caters to the need at that point in time. Right, speed is the key. Right, often one of the articles that I had written long back also talked about that. Often we all as young engineers get into the loop of that, I'm gonna make it perfect, that it will work forever. The reality of the fast moving tech world is that the things, the dynamics, how business runs, the technology, all of it is going to change at such a fast pace that whatever we write today, we should accept and admit the fact that it's not going to be relevant in few years, right? So delivering at high speed for the problem at hand should always take precedence. Let's say, if you are able to, let's say, ship something very quickly using Amazon API Gateway, MuleSoft, etc., just go ahead and do that while you know that what could be, and that is where the intellectual depth comes into the play, that I am building this using this stuff because it's gonna, ship things much faster. It's gonna be much reliable for the needs right now. But I also know that in future, what are the, constraints or restrictions we might face because of this design choice, and this is the fallback for that, right?
Right.
So I think having that intellectual depth or that technical depth is what helps best. That this is what I'm doing right now, which retains the speed, which caters to everything that we need right now. What we will need in future, we can't know. The fact is, we can only predict, but we cannot know. But to some extent, saying that these are the possibilities of future. Out of these, these are the events in which this might not work out. And in that scenario, this might be the solution. We will explore them, right? So I think that's the right approach.
Right. I think we'll take a couple of last few questions. I think Nikhil's question on tech stacks on Scalar, I think we'll wrap up with that, the last one. But before that, one question I'll take from Karan. So he has asked a more startup context question. Is he has given a scenario. It's a non-funded startup, and then founders, if they are not from tech background, how should they move forward with a tech stack for developing something like Airbnb? He has asked. I think apart from finding a tech co-founder, I think he's asking.
The solution I'll tell you is that find, don't worry about the funding. Funding doesn't matter. We all have heard that amazing, very inspiring case of Zerodha, right?
Yes.
Zerodha never raised any funds. Nitin and both the brothers, they both are not techie, right? The thing is that, of course, anyone can learn tech, no brainer. I think that is one of the core that we follow at Scalar, that anyone can learn to code, right? Anyone can become a techie. But of course, it doesn't mean that, if you do not know tech, you cannot build a tech startup. Zerodha is hardcore tech startup, one of the most inspiring one. Never raised any external funding, and now the three co-founders are taking salaries of 100 CR, right? Not sure how much of you heard that news, but very, very inspiring news, right? Amount of wealth they have created for everyone and themselves as well, right? So, like to choose, like first advice would be find a tech co-founder, like must have, like, as we often say that we need to have co-founders with the complementary abilities, right? So I think if you are a non-tech co-founder, it would be great to find a good tech co-founder. By any chance, Karan, if you are part of Scalar, I'm sure you can find many co-founder in the Scalar community itself. So you can give that a shot. Second is that, again, for choosing the tech stack, while you might not have a tech co-founder, try to have this framework that, what are the core needs that you have in terms of features, in terms of problems, right? That are you going to need, very high, what is the volume of requests that you can expect, that is called estimation part. That what estimation can you do for, let's say, next 6 months or next 1 year. No need to design for 5 years in future. Trust me, the crux of a startup is that, you keep winning small battles and eventually you win the war, right? So
Right.
plan for 6 to 12 months, that what is the kind of scale you might expect, what are the kind of things that you might want to build in next 6 to 12 months, and what are the requirements for that, right? Get in, speak to someone in your network who knows tech well, and try to learn from them that, which frameworks might support this best, which might not. Eventually best would be to have a tech co-founder, like, if you are building a company like Airbnb, which is purely tech, then you need deep tech expertise within the company. Actually, traditionally in India, we have heavily undermined tech. Trust me that as businesses in India, we have heavily undermined tech. And fortunately, like if we see all the rise of the new age multi-billion companies like Zomato, Swiggy, Flipkart, all these companies were able to do well because these were tech first, right?
Yes.
So do not undermine tech. Tech being tech first is like very, very necessary. Tech alone doesn't win business. Trust me, if there are 5 great geeks, they might, like, even for Apple, along with Steve Wozniak, we needed Steve Jobs, right?
Right.
So, both are hand in hand, both are two excels of to make a business. So being tech first is super important, and which alone cannot do anything, but with good business strategy, great execution, then tech can give you superpower, right? A company with the same business intelligence probably will only be able to do X, but with tech potential, with very tech driven execution, it might go to 100x or 1000x.
Right.
So being tech first is very, very important if you want to make a very high scale organization, be it Airbnb, be it Booking.com, be it Flipkart, Swiggy. The core reason of success of any of these companies because these were tech first companies.
Right. That's a very important perspective to be put in there, and I love that you highlighted the fact that a lot of big people in India undermine tech, and companies which have actually grown big definitely are the ones who
Yeah.
invested into it.
If you speak to, I'm
Uh,
sure, Arnav, that if you speak to any of these founders, be it Sachin Bansal or uh, Dipinder, they all will say that guys, tech is the eventual solution. Processes might handle it for some time, but eventually
right.
it's gonna be a process driven by tech.
Correct. I think, and then my interactions with Dipinder, he used to say the same thing. He used to say that always long-term invest in tech, short-term fix the short-term battles, sometimes
Right.
with tech, sometimes without tech, whatever you need. But
Yeah.
long-term, tech will give you the most efficient solution once you have found out what the problem is. Right. Uh, so we will, I think, wrap up with one last question, which I think a lot of people might be curious to know about, is the tech stack used in Scalar Academy. But before we go to that answer from Abhimanyu, I just mentioned to all of you, I think this is the second time on a weekend we are doing this with Abhimanyu, and we got very good response the last video as well, this one as well. So what we'll do is, I think every Sunday 5 p.m. we will set up some time, and we have got multiple such themes that people have asked us about. And then we'll pick up some of those topics, and we'll definitely, meet every Sunday 5 p.m. at least for the next few weeks. I can say for sure. I would love to do that. And in any topics that you would want us to talk about, definitely write in your, in the YouTube comments and all as well. After the live stream is also ended, we would love to go through them and pick some of them. And so, yeah, moving to the final answer, and I think a lot of people might be curious to know. So, what all technologies are used in Scalar's tech stack right now?
Right. Interesting. So, as I mentioned that, any large scale, as soon as it becomes a large scale execution, there wouldn't be one single tech stack powering it, right? Because there
Correct.
are so many different things which are, going on in the background. And one single tech stack might not cater to everything, right?
Right.
So the core platform of Scalar is still built on Ruby on Rails, the core, data management, etc. On the back end for database we use MySQL, and trust me guys, even Facebook runs on MySQL. So anyone telling you that that MySQL doesn't work for high scale, it works. It just works. There is not a lot of fancy tech that is needed, but of course Facebook also uses a lot of different data stores in addition to MySQL as well. We do as well. We use Redshift, which is the kind of a key value store, data warehousing by AWS. for kind of all the analytics and dumping all the data, do running analysis on the data. For one of the key part of Scalar is the live classes, where we have tried to create a virtual classroom, where the interactions are like asking a doubt, is collaborating with others in the classroom, etc., is as good as, if not better than a real sitting together and learning together, right? So that one is like, now if you see that, that's going to need a very high performance stream solution in the background, right? That there might be 100, 200, like we have run master classes with even 3, 4, 5,000 people attending it all together, right? And so that one runs on top of, there are various streaming solutions that we have tried from time to time. There is one provided by AWS. And another thing, if you see, one interesting fact here is that we didn't build these underlying technologies. Because building these is going to, as they always say, that build versus buy. I would rather focus on building the classroom platform so interactive and so engaging, rather than worrying about how these network packets are being dropped, whether I have an edge server in each city, in each town or not, right? Because a streaming performance will only work properly if there's a very wide edge network, right? Now, let's say AWS or Agora, they have already created a massive edge network, so it's better to kind of rather just use it rather than trying to build it yourself, right? So at Scalar, we use both AWS and Agora, and here kind of we try to do this performance switching. And generally, like for any mission critical solution, like for example, if I am conducting a class and in between, let's say Agora faces certain issues, I cannot afford that my learners are not able to hear me, or there's a lot of lag. So then what we do is that in the backend there's an automatic switchover, that there are two services running in the background, and if we see more lag in one, then we can easily switch over to other one, right? Similarly, for CDN, we use CloudFront and Akamai both. We have experimented with both. CDN is content distribution network, so again, something which improves the performance of the system substantially. So you kind of try out various things, you see which is working best for your users. It depends on a lot of parameters. Let's say in India, let's say AWS might work better than Akamai, because AWS simply has a denser edge network in India, and given, of course, all our learners are going to be India, so we might prefer Akamai over AWS. But let's say if I have another batch of students running in US, and then I know that, let's say, Akamai's network in US is better than AWS's network, then I will use Akamai there. And I can have in my production layer, I can have these decisions that basis geo IP of the user, it uses a different streaming platform, or it uses a different CDN platform, right? So there are multiple layers to tech stack, right? And there are often different choices that you make basis the feature, basis geography, and all such cases. So yeah, I hope that answers the Scalar's architecture on a high level. Of course, I would love to in detail talk about the entire architecture, that what are the various pieces, how do they communicate with each other, and what is the reason behind designing it in this way. But probably that's for some other time.
Probably for a master class.
Yeah. We have a master class on that. Awesome.
We probably have like I think LMS Learning Management System Masterclass, I think, coming up next month. So by the way, if you want to, anybody watching the video, will love to discuss at length about how high level systems are designed and not just the tech stack, then definitely go to scalar.com/events and register for some of the masterclasses that are coming up on whatever systems that you want to design. And there are a lot of you will see upcoming 3-4 masterclasses, some on app design, some on backend design, and you might go for that. And by the way, you heard about the tech stack from Abhimanyu. If anybody is interested in working on any of these pieces, we also have some tech team career openings as well. You can check out the career page. I think Tushar would love to see people applying there as well. So on that note,
let us know in comments that what is a topic that you would like us to talk about in the comments.
Yes,
like definitely. as Arnav mentioned, that we are going to be live Sunday 5 p.m. Of course,
Sunday 5 p.m. we will do. Yes.
Yeah. We do have a long list of very interesting things that we can talk about, but I'm sure there might be a lot more, even more fascinating ideas that, or things that you want us to share our learnings and experiences about. Would love to
Right.
see that in comments.
Sure, sure, sure. Put them in the comments, and we would pick them up, and we'll meet next Sunday then at 5 p.m. with a similar kind of topic then. And till then, so long. So all the best, everybody. Stay safe. Bye bye.
Take care, guys.